大家好，这是你的老哥 JKon。今天我们想谈谈中国。Nah, I'm just messing with y'all. I can't speak Chinese like that. But what I can speak about is the rise of Chinese Valorant and how I believe that they are going to improve at an incredible rate and be a force on the international stage sooner than you know. Let's get into it. Boostio has famously claimed that China will never be better than North America for one in Valorant, and that they are 3 years behind. And while that statement does seem true, I don't believe it. I think China is a lot closer than most people think, and giving them their own league will only help refine their playstyle and give them more experience. Just look at League of Legends and the LPL. They currently have 17 teams in their franchise league, where every other region has 10. They've been able to win 3 world championships and continue to have incredible performances on the international stage while having some of the highest viewer and player counts across the board. Valorant is exploding in China already, and there are many talents in the region that have yet to make a name for themselves. Speaking of making a name for themselves, let's start out with China's most well-known team and the team that has made the most international events from their region so far, Edward Gaming. EDG has exploded in popularity throughout 2023, being spearheaded by their superstar opera, ChocoChip. They were able to make back-to-back 5th, 6th places at Masters Tokyo and Champions Los Angeles this year, and the team has picked up many fans along the way. Before we dive deep into their standout year, let's take a look at what led us up to this point. For those who did not know, Valorant wasn't released in China officially until July 12, 2023. So that means every Chinese player was either playing on another region's server via VPN or only had access to a beta version of the game until this date. Fortunately for us, that did not stop players from being invested into the game early, and even more importantly, organizations that were invested into the game early. The first of these such unions was my boy Hao Dong and Edward Gaming, as they signed the young IGL to their roster on August 5th, 2020, and have continued to build teams around him since. 2020 saw another very important signing occur as Life joins the team as their main jet player. Life was a key member of their roster until the end of the 2022 season and has been an important figure within the Chinese scene, as he has moved to another roster and brought them to the international stage. The end of 2021 saw the main core of the team that we know today assemble as Chichu, Nobody, and Kang all join the roster. The final piece of the puzzle, Smoggy, was added as a 6th man less than a month before the 2022 East Asia LCQ started. All throughout this time, as the roster was assembling, EDG were good, but not dominant, making multiple grand finals of events, but not being able to take home the trophy. That all changed in 2022. The year started out with a grand finals appearance at FGC Invitational 2022 Act 1. Where they fell to Weibo Gaming 1-3. EDG fell to Weibo twice in the tournament, as their future member Smoggy absolutely dominated them on the server. EDG were able to exact their revenge on Smoggy and Weibo as they took the Spring Gauntlet Invitational and won their first tournament. They would then continue this momentum into FGC Invitational 2022 Act 2, as they made it to Grand Finals after going on a lower bracket run and were able to win the tournament over K1 Esports Club. K1 had 2 members of current BLG, but we'll get to them in a bit. EDG repeated this feat again as they took the grand finals of Act 3 of the Invitational over K1 and secured the first seed of China coming into VCT East Asia LCQ. Speaking of East Asia LCQ, this was the first time that we would be able to see Chinese representatives against international competition. And oh boy, did EDG have a debut. They absolutely dominated the tournament, going 9-0 in maps as they swept everyone aside and booked their ticket to Istanbul. Now granted, these teams were not the best of the best and were probably considered tier 2 at the time, but still, a strong showing was important for this Edward Gaming squad. EDG would make their official debut on the international stage in the opening matchup of the tournament against Paper Rex. They came out swinging, winning the first 5 rounds of Pearl before Paper Rex responded with 5 of their own. The next 14 rounds were extremely back and forth, with neither team stringing together more than 2 rounds together. Paper Rex eventually closed out the map in the 24th round. We move on to Icebox, where EDG made a statement, absolutely crushing Paper Rex on their attack side, only ceding 2 rounds before they closed out the map 13-5. If you thought that Pro might have been a fluke, this map solidified the fact that EDG were here to play. Unfortunately for the Chinese side, Jing decided to have an absolutely dominant Haven performance, whipping out the Reyna and putting up 25, 17, and 5 with 338 ACS. Smoggy was insane as well, fighting with incredible effort, but it wasn't enough as Paper Rex would close out the map 13-8 and EDG would be sent to the lower bracket. EDG would then face off against Liquid for elimination, and if there was a team that was willing to take head-to-head aim duels against them, it would be Liquid. Bind opened up with Edward Gaming taking the pistol round and the anti-eco, but Liquid responded with a hat trick of rounds. EDG were able to claim another double, but that pretty much was the end of their map as Liquid closed it out, winning 10 out of 11 of the remaining rounds. Everyone on Liquid went positive on the map, with Kang being the only one to say the same for his team. We head to breeze where the map was much more competitive than the first one, as EDG were able to push the map to overtime, but the game was very scrappy. TL were able to pull off many thrifties, and despite EDG winning both pistol rounds, they were still in a deficit and had to come back. Life had a great recovery on this map from Bind, but it wasn't enough as TL stomped his team into the ground in overtime and sent the Chinese representatives home. EDG were able to show a lot of potential, but they definitely needed to refine their protocols and clean up their gameplay to start competing against the more experienced teams. EDG would close out their year by participating in 2 more tournaments, but were unable to bring home a trophy in either one. In the first tournament, Zyper Arena Weekly Showdown, EDG would sweep aside Nightwings Gaming and Tales of Eastern Gaming. Toes. But would fall twice to the tournament winners of Shenzhen Enter. Point of note, EDG were playing with Abo instead of Nobody, and life was transferred to Attacking Soul Esports. In the second tournament and final one of the year, FGC Valorant Invitational 2022 Epilogue, EDG would play with the roster that we saw through all of 2023. They were able to get revenge on Shenzhen Enter and eventually made it to the grand finals, beating FPX Juchu 3-0 in winners finals, but were unable to claim the trophy as Juchu got revenge 3-1. An unfortunate Christmas present and a sad ending to EDG's year. 2023 started out for them like it did for every franchise team, as EDG were invited to participate in Lock-In. They were slated to face off against the new look 100 Thieves coming off of a win at Red Bull Homeground over the C9 Super Team, and this matchup was one of the best in the entire tournament in my opinion. The series opened up on Icebox with 100 Thieves taking a dominant 8-4 defensive half despite losing the first 2 rounds. 100 Thieves were able to hit map point before EDG clawed back to 10 rounds before 100 Thieves closed it out. We move on to Lotus, where 100 Thieves were able to barely win the half 7-5. They were able to claim the second pistol, but were completely shut out for the rest of the half as EDG dominated them, only dropping 1 round in the following 10, and they evened out the map score. Pearl opened up with a Chichu clutch as EDG took a 7-5 defensive half. The second half would eventually even out the scores at 10-10, useless as bitch, with the final 4 rounds being split like a Kit Kat as we headed to overtime. Stellar went huge to win the final 2 rounds of regulation, sneaking a defuse for 1 and blindly taking out Chichu and his Viper Spit for another. 100 Thieves would cleanly take the final 2 rounds of overtime and end the thrilling series, sending EDG home. A huge shout out has to go to Chichu, as he had so many absurd clutches that it really felt like if he was alive, the round was never truly over. Stellar stepped up huge for his team and was the highest rated player in the server, going 66, 43, and 17 with 250 ACS. EDG looked much more refined and cleaner than they did at Champs 2022 and definitely flashed a lot of the potential that we would see later in the year. Stellar is the most good-looking Valorant player ever. He is the only white boy in history to get it poppin'. Genetically, he is a Chad on and off the server. Oh my god, talking about him gets me lightheaded. I just want to see my cute boy win. EDG would return to China and absolutely dominate the FGC Invitational 2023 Act 1 tournament, only dropping 2 maps total leading up to the Grand Finals, which they unfortunately lost 2-3 to Attacking Soul Esports. The Grand Finals was definitely a jet matchup as Kong went head-to-head against his old teammate as they both put up 95 and 93 kills respectively in the series. Act 2 would see a repeat of domination as EDG once again only dropped 2 maps leading up to the Grand Finals. Granted, those 2 maps were a 0-2 affair against ASC in the upper semifinals of playoffs, they were able to get revenge in the lower finals 3-0. EDG would face off against BOG in the Grand Finals, slapping them around with a 3-0 victory, only ceding 21 rounds total and claiming their first tournament victory in the year. EDG would go on to Masters Tokyo with tremendous momentum behind them, only losing 9 maps all year. Masters Tokyo was the stage where EDG truly put Chinese Valorant on the map, as like I said earlier, they would be able to place 5th, 6th, not only being the deepest run by a Chinese team at an international event, but also being the first Chinese roster to take a series win on the international stage. And those series wins would include 2-0 victories over Navi, T1, and Loud. EDG suffered 3 series losses at the event, but they would at least be able to take a map off of their opponents in each of those series, and play each matchup pretty competitively. They lost their opening series against T1 in groups, but were able to get revenge. They matched up against Team Liquid in the quarterfinals, where Kong went nuclear, and they put up a much better fight this time than when they last matched up. And they would once again meet up against Paper Rex, and they would be beaten by the Southeast Asian side once more. Something I didn't notice before doing research on this video is that EDG would play against the same teams across multiple international events. Not saying that it's scripted, but it's definitely a funny correlation that I noticed. EDG were the talk of the town, and Kong solidified his name as a fan favorite, giving us this iconic photo that will stand the test of time of Valorant in my opinion. They were definitely able to prove that Chinese Valorant was coming, Pause. And that they weren't that far behind the rest of the world. They were able to beat many respected cores and showed that they shouldn't be taken as a joke anymore. EDG went back to China where they had to compete in a qualifier for champs and they absolutely dominated it, sweeping the entire tournament with an 11-1 map win-loss. That loss came in the grand finals against BLG, who would also represent China in the upcoming tournament. But again, we'll get to them later. EDG would be placed into Group A as China's first seed, being able to escape groups, claiming 2 series wins over European side giants and falling to Paper X. They had a really tough draw in playoffs, facing off against Evil Geniuses, and despite winning map 1 in overtime, they would get dominated in the final 2 maps, sending them to lowers. They would once again face off against their Chinese brothers in BLG and showed that they are still the kings as they knocked them out of the tournament. EDG would then go on to face Loud once more, but the Brazilian side were able to take revenge from Masters Tokyo, punching their ticket to the Kia Forum and sending EDG home. Go check out my video, Valorant Champions 2023 in 53 minutes if you want a more specific breakdown of each of these matchups. EDG were able to once again place 5th, 6th at an international event, building upon their legacy. Although they would most likely have wanted to go deeper in the tournament and surpass their Tokyo placement, I don't think they would consider this year a failure because they definitely took the world by storm and now everyone knows their names. They are China's strongest team, and with their own franchise league coming in for 2024, I think the region will only get stronger, which in turn will allow EDG to have stronger competition to play against. A rising tide lifts all boats. Speaking of building a legacy, let's talk about some of the other teams that China has sent to international competitions and how they've started to make a name for themselves. The second Chinese team that we would see on the international stage was FunPlus Phoenix at Lock-In. And yes, this is the same organization that won Masters Copenhagen, but that European roster has been transferred to Navi as FPX returned to China. FPX had a Chinese roster under the name FPX Juchu during this time that the core has been built around since early 2022 and have reclaimed just the FPX title. FPX would debut on the international stage against Carmine Core with a roster of Chinese and Taiwanese talent. They unfortunately would not win their opening matchup and would fall 1-2, but they were able to take Haven with their unorthodox playstyle of double controller, double initiator, and chamber. This matchup was definitely chaotic, but we were at least treated to multiple non-standard comps, but the French side were able to take the dub. FPX definitely have a unique approach to the game, and this would not be the last we saw of this team in 2023. In Act 1 of the FGC Invitational 2023, FPX were able to go 4-1 in the group stage and were able to take their opening playoff matchup against Totoro Gaming. They would then fall to EDG 1-2 going to the lower bracket. They would win one more series against Dragon Ranger Gaming before being eliminated by Attacking Soul Esports, who went on an incredible lower bracket run to win the tournament. But we'll get to them in a bit. We head to Act 2 of the Invitational, where FPX were able to 2-0 both their group stage matches as well as win their quarterfinal against Weibo Gaming 2-1. They would then face off against the 2 grand finalists in BLG and EDG, losing 0-2 to both, missing out on Masters Tokyo. They would then have to wait until the Champions China qualifier, in which they held the 4th seed. FPX would go on to lose their opening matchup against Tailu 0-2 and were sent to the lower bracket, but this is where the Phoenix would be reborn as the boys rose from the ashes and went on a lower bracket run, taking down Weibo Gaming 2-0, Trace Esports 2-1, and got revenge on Tailu 3-1. Unfortunately, like my train and party animals, the brakes were pulled as BLG were able to stop the Phoenix's flight and took the lower bracket finals 3-2. Fortunately, their run was enough as FPX were able to qualify to champions as China's 3rd seed. They were placed in Group B and unfortunately were not able to take a map on the international stage as they lost to EG and T1. Young was an absolute beast on stage, but his team definitely still had a lot of room to grow. With their year nearing the end, they have made a roster change heading into China Evolution Series Act 1 variation. I'll go more into this tournament and why it's important a bit later. They have dropped their duelist player Yuka as he has transferred to Attacking Soul Esports, and they have brought in Australian duelist Autumn in his place. Apparently Autumn speaks some Mandarin and they have a combination of Chinese and English for their comms. There will definitely be a lot of mixed rosters or imports in the Chinese league, as we have seen Korean talent already make a name for themselves. Shout out to Stu on Rare Atom. If you know, you know. Speaking of Attacking Soul Esports, they were China's first seed representative at Masters Tokyo, spearheaded by ex-EDG duelist Life and the man with the greatest gamer tag of all time, HFMI0DZJC9Z7. ASE were able to qualify to the international event by winning FGC Valorant Invitational 2023 Act 1 playoffs by beating EDG 3-2 in the grand finals. They were placed in Group B at Tokyo and unfortunately ran into DRX in their opening matchup. Not only were both of these teams familiar with one another as scrim partners, but DRX is much more experienced than the the Chinese roster, and despite DRX running Foxy 9, they were still able to pull out the 2-0 victory. ASE looked incredibly aggressive, but their mid-rounding still needed some work. They went on to face Foot Esports in the lower bracket, and although they did take Haven quite convincingly with a 13-8 win, the rest of their pick ban was a bit troll as they gave Foot 2 of their best maps in Ascent and Lotus, which they took promptly and sent the Chinese squad home. They entered the Champions China qualifier as the second seed, but would not progress very far in the tournament as they fell to Trace Esports 2-1 in their opening matchup. They would win their first lower bracket matchup against Monarch Effect 2-0, but would once again find themselves on the wrong side of a 2-1 as Tyloo ended their tournament lives. The next time we would see this roster would be in China Evolution Series Act 1 variation, but again, I'll go over that in a bit. The last and final team that we'll be going over today is Bilibili Gaming. Now, if you want to talk about leaving a mark on the scene, BLG are your guys. BLG, led by their superstar duelist YZ, debuted on the international stage at Champions 2023 as China's second seed. They shocked the world and NRG as they 2-0'd the North American side in an embarrassing fashion, as YZ absolutely farmed with his judge. They went on to face Fnatic but got absolutely clapped as they were only able to take 10 rounds across 2 maps. They once again faced off against NRG and again would 2-0 them on 2 new maps, eliminating NRG and ruining pretty much everyone's pick'ems. BLG would face off against DRX and give it to them hard. Pause. As they took the first 10 of 11 rounds in the half. Unfortunately, the turns tabled and DRX won 12 rounds straight as they stole away Lotus. DRX would comfortably take Haven and send the Chinese squad to lowers where they would have to face off against their brothers, EDG. EDG were able to 2-1 BLG and gave us some very exciting games, but the journey for the boys in blue would end there as they were eliminated from the tournament. Their debut was definitely one of the debuts of all time, and they only won against one team, but still are the second most successful China roster so far. If you want a more specific breakdown of BLG's journey at Champs, again, go check out my Valorant Champions 2023 in 53 minutes. BLG's roster was put together this year, acquiring YZ and Rin from Tales of Eastern Gaming. Toes. Never gets old. Before the start of the 2023 season, Beyond joined from Dragon Rider Gaming before the start of the Act 2 qualifiers for the FGC Invitational 2023, in which BLG came in first place. K9 and Yosemite were brought over from K1 Esports before the start of Act 2, which spurned the team on a 5-series win streak to the grand finals of playoffs, where they fell 0-3 to EDG. They entered the China Champions qualifier as the 3rd seed and were able to take their first 2 series without dropping a map, going 2-0 against Monarch Effect and 3-0 against Trace Esports. Unfortunately for them, their matchup against EDG was a repeat of last time as they went 0-3 and had to face FPX in the lower final. BLG were able to stop the Phoenix's lower bracket run 3-2 and would once again face EDG in the grand finals. And unlike the last 2 matchups, BLG did not get swept this time as they were able to take 1 map off of the Kings of China and would enter Champions as China's 2nd seed. Overall, that's pretty good for a team that was put together this year. And that leads us to where we are today, with China being announced as the 4th franchise league and just completing a tournament called the China Evolution Series Act 1 variation. They seriously need to work on their naming scheme. This is just an absolute mouthful. This tournament is important because as we head into franchising, China still needs to complete their own Ascension tournament as their franchise organizations are getting finalized. So in a sense, this is their Ascension, and I believe that for teams that are already franchised, it's more of a tournament for them to participate in, while rosters who are not franchised are competing for points in the Ascension portion. As mentioned earlier, we have seen the new look FPX here as Autumn has joined the roster, and BLG were playing with one of their academy members in place of Yosemite. EDG were able to win the tournament and still look dominant as ever, but there is definitely no lack in skill as a lot of these gamers can click heads pretty damn well. The rest of the stages of the Evolution series will continue to play out this year, so if you want to get a peek at what Chinese Valorant is looking like in 2023 and going into 2024, I say go check it out. And that's the video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about Chinese Valorant and the rise of these teams down below. Do you think Boostio is right or wrong that China will always be behind North America? I would love to hear what you guys have to say. If you like this video, consider checking out this video right here where I take a look back at how Chaos 9 came together and fell apart. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay hydrated. Peace.